So here's the second video in the series of what accordion should you buy. This time I'm not a cat person, by the way, this guy just happened to be in my chair. I'm going to talk about voices and tremolo. 2 voices, 3 voices, clarinet, bassoon, medium, low. Let's have a look at the differences that you will have when you're choosing an accordion. Okay, Chapper? So let's talk about voices and tremolo and other aspects of an accordion. What accordion should you buy? This is what a 2-voice box, such as the type I recommended you start with, sounds like. So that is 2 voices tuned to a moderate swing. Let's look at a different kind of accordion so I can show you how voices work. Now you can see this is a different kind of accordion. It's got 2.5 rows and it's got 12 basses, but that's not what interests me for the moment. For this video, what is interesting about this accordion is 3 voices on the treble side, and each voice can be individually switched on and off by means of these stops or registers. So there are 3 basic types of accordion reeds in terms of pitch. You have medium or clarinet, which is the normal voice, the same octave as a violin. Sometimes it's called clarinet, medium or clarinet. Then you get a low voice, which is sometimes called bassoon, which is an octave below. And then you get a high voice, which is sometimes called piccolo, and it's an octave above the clarinet. Now, I don't have any boxes with a piccolo voice, so I can't show you that. But here, this accordion is set up with 2 medium voices and 1 low. Now, here's what a single voice clarinet sounds like on an accordion. That's just 1 voice. Now, if I switch in another medium voice, you'll immediately hear the difference. You can hear there's a slight tremolo there. Just compare again what it sounds like with a single and 2. Now that's tuned to, I would say, a swing tuning, which means that the second voice is tuned a little bit sharper than the first. And the effect that that has is to give you a tremolo, because the interference between the 2 frequencies will give you a tremolo or a wah-wah kind of sound, which on a swing-tuned accordion you have to listen very carefully to hear it. Because that's swing-tuned, we're getting some a very slow tremolo. And the further apart you tune the 2 voices or the 2 reeds, the faster the tremolo will be, until at some point it gets unpleasant. The stronger the tremolo, the faster the tremolo. So most modern accordions are tuned with light tremolo, and swing is a very popular description of that. And I think on a box like this, probably at our middle A here, 440 Hertz, probably the difference is a matter of 7 cents or something like that. The cent is a 100th of a semitone. So there we have the difference between 1 medium voice and 2 medium voices, and here I also have a low voice, a bassoon voice. Now, most of the time you won't hear a bassoon voice played on its own, but switched in with the medium voices. Here's the medium voices without the bassoon voice, and with the bassoon voice. So it gives you a lot of power down at the bottom end. So that is a clarinet voice for you and a bassoon voice. As I say, I can't show you a piccolo, and it's a shame. Neither can I show you anything like the classic Irish accordions of the 1950s and 60s, which would be the four-voice Paolo sopranis, which were tuned with 3 medium voices and 1 bassoon voice, and tuned with a wet kind of tuning, strong tremolo, known as musette, which had the advantage of being carried very well and very good for playing in dance halls without amplification. To modern ears it sounds a little bit unpleasant. It's likely to set your teeth on edge, and the fashion for those musette boxes, apart from for a few people, has mainly died out. So let's look at some other aspects regarding voices. Now, the different kinds of tremolo have, there's various ways of describing it, and you get in order, starting at the driest possible tuning. You hear accordions referred to as being dry tuned, then you'll get swing, then you'll get demi-swing, which is usually more of a tremolo than swing, surprisingly enough. It seems counterintuitive to me anyway. And then the next thing along the road is tremolo americano, which is a slightly stronger tremolo. And after that you get into probably what is referred to as musette, which is pretty wet tuning. Now, I don't have enough boxes to show you all those different kinds of tuning, but here's a bit of an example. Now, as I said, this box is tuned for me by my tuner with about 8 cents at A here. So that is a nice swing. Another thing to be aware of with the tuning of boxes is that if a tuner keeps the same distance between the reeds up and down the scale in terms of cents or in terms of hertz, the tremolo will increase as you get higher up the scale. And I generally prefer to have that taper off so that the tremolo stays more or less constant. There's a physical reason for that. If you're, say, if you're tuned at 440, one reed at 440, the other reed at 442, by the time you get up to 880, one reed will be at 880, the other one will be at 884, and so I think I'm right in saying that, the beats will increase. But on a box like this, the tremolo does increase slightly as we go up, but not dramatically. So there's a box tuned at about 8 cents. Here's another 2-voice accordion, which is a little bit wetter. It also has a different sound because of the Hohner reeds, but this is a 2-voice box with probably 10 cents. You can hear the tremolo much more distinctly there. I think it's a tremolo that suits this box very well, whereas the slightly drier swing on the saltarelle suits that box very well too. Now let's look at some 3-voice accordions. This one looks very similar to the last one, but this one is a special. It's had a 3rd medium voice put into it. So unlike my Serenellini, which has 2 clarinet voices and a bassoon voice, this one has 3 medium voices, 3 clarinet voices. Tuned fairly close together, but the tremolo becomes much more complex. The sound is more complex with 3 reeds. It's also very loud and has fantastic carrying power. Now here's a similar kind of accordion to the last one I showed you. Again with 3 voices, but it's a larger accordion. It doesn't have an extra voice squeezed into it. 3 medium voices. It's in BC, and here on this box the tuning is drier, the reeds are closer together, and it gives you a very nice sound also. complex sound. And for a complete contrast, this is probably the closest thing that I have to the old four-voice Paolo Soprani boxes that were so popular in Ireland in the 1950s and 60s. This is a four-voice Hona prima tona, which is in terrible shape, and it has a really strong musette tuning. And it has 3 medium voices and 1 low. So if I play the medium voices for you. There's a few problems probably with the wax and the valves in this box. It needs an overhaul badly, but you can see that is a really the kind of musette that will set your teeth on edge. Now what happens when you chuck in the bassoon voice? So there you have a very strong musette with 4 voices, 3 medium and 1 low. So what does all this tell you? The one thing I can't show you is a 4-voice box with a piccolo voice. Now that is a typical setup for 1-row boxes, particularly in the Irish and Quebecois traditions, would be to have 1 bassoon, 2 medium and 1 piccolo voice. Now that gives you the kind of sound that is a great deal of fun to play, possibly less fun to listen to, and possibly less fun to play with. I'm not a great fan of 1-row boxes for that reason. I like to play with other people, with fiddles and flutes, and the thing about the 1-row box is that it occupies 3 octaves if you play with all the voices engaged, and it tends to take up too much of the audible spectrum for my taste anyway. And I can't demonstrate one for you either. Also, a box like this in musette tuning is not a lot of fun to play with if you're a fiddle player, because it tends to drown you out and reduce your contribution to something marginal. I still think you should get a 2-voice box, as I said in the first clip in this series, if you're starting. If somebody offers you a nice 3-voice or 4-voice, well, take it, by all means. But if you're looking, get yourself a nice simple 2-voice. And I want to show you a couple of things about the action and how that can affect the sound. Now I'm going to show you a few boxes with the grills off so you can see the action of the pallets and the levers here. And there's some interesting aspects to this. One is that on a very standard conventional box like this, the levers, obviously, that open the pallets here are of different lengths. So what that means is that there's more leverage for the outer row of buttons, which is lifting this row of pallets, and if you can see, they open quite a wide distance. The inner pallets, because the levers are shorter, they just can't open quite as wide, and so less air flows through the reeds, and this has actually an interesting effect, which you'll notice on nearly every 2-voice box, or 2-row box I should say, or 3-row box, that there's a difference in tone between the rows. There's my inner row with the short levers opening the bottom row of pallets. Now obviously there's a tonal difference there. I mean, we're a semitone lower. But there is, if I play 2 notes the same, C sharp, the inner row is slightly muted. It has a more fluty sound, and the outer row speaks more freely, if you like. So most continental boxes, these boxes are designed to have the outer row as the main row, where we end up with the inner row as the main row, and so we get, on most boxes, a more fluty sound on the inner row, which I don't mind, but there is definitely more power on the outer row. Now, that has been addressed. That was addressed, I think it's with the behest of Jackie Daly, that Saltarell started making their boxes like this. Now, they figured things out so that this inner row of buttons actually opens the top row of pallets on this early model Saltarell Bois. And then the outer row But there's some compensation because they use here a sort of cantilever, reverse lever mechanism to try and get the inner row palettes up a little bit higher. But there is still a difference in tone between the two rows. I don't know if you can hear that on the video, but this outer row definitely is more fluty sounding than the inner row. So this works very well for B, C and C sharp D players to have an early model Salterelle Webb. I think in the later models they've gone back to a more conventional method where, similar to the Hohner I just showed you, where the inner row opens the bottom row of palettes, which, if it's true, is a shame. Now, some boxes, take this Serenellini here, which is a 3-voice box, 3-row box you could say, and 3-voice as well. There's a lot of the cantilever mechanism, I think, works a little bit better here, and there's very little difference between the tone of the 3 rows. For example, F sharp there. In fact, both the F sharps are on this row. I've got a B here, and both the B's open on this row of palettes. But what I find is with this box, because of the reverse lever mechanism, there's very little tonal quality difference between the 2 rows, and they've done a great job with that. So that gives you something to watch out for. So if you find that you pick up your Irish box and you play on the 2 different rows, and you find that the sound is not the same, don't be surprised. It's a design fault, if you like, of the most accordions, and not much you can do about it. It's just something you have to live with. But it doesn't. The way we play doesn't really make too much difference in practice. Now, there's one other thing I'd like to show you about voices and tremolo, which is that our accordions are tuned to equal temperament, which is the way that pianos have been tuned for the last couple of 100 years, I suppose. And as you may know, equal temperament is a fudge tuning, a compromise tuning, which allows us to play on the piano in all keys, although some of the intervals are not as sweet as they might be in other temperaments. And I'll give you an example here. Now, you can hear this very clearly when you're playing with just a single voice, that the major third interval, say D to F sharp, or G to B, is actually a pretty harsh sound. And the third to the fifth isn't much better. That's a single voice. And concertinas suffer from that problem. And concertinas, often to make the chords sweeter, will adopt a slightly different temperament. They'll be tuned to, for example, what's called quarter comma mean tone tuning to give sweeter chords. Now, on an accordion, especially a chromatic accordion like this, it's not really practical to do that. But the great thing about tremolo is you bring in a second voice, and the tremolo takes the hard edge off those chords to some extent, to a great extent. Put in the second voice. So that is why I think 2-voice boxes are great, and why I'm less keen on things like the Castagnari Lily, which has 1 voice, very powerful little box, very compact, but you can't get away from those harsh, equal tempered thirds. Whereas with a bit of tremolo, you can take the badness out of it.